Hello, and thank you for joining us for today's panel discussion, Before the Storm, New Approaches for Identifying and Preventing Workplace Violence, sponsored by videosurveillance.com. My name is Beth Mirza, and I'll be moderating today's panel discussion. And today we're going to focus on the issue of violence in the workplace. And let me introduce our panelists. We have three. Joining us from Tucson, Arizona, Joel DeVoskin, PhD, is professor at the University of Arizona College of Medicine, a clinical psychologist and diplomat in forensic psychology of the American Board of Professional Psychology. He is a fellow of the American Psychological Association and the American Psychology Law Society. He also works with the Threat Assessment Group in Newport Beach, California. He will discuss signs of future or imminent workplace violence, predictors, and warning behaviors. Next up, we have Tess Taylor, PHR. She is owner of Content Right Now, managing editor of The HR Writer, and content manager for Benefit Focus in Charleston, South Carolina. Tess is a human resources professional with 14 years of corporate experience in the environmental, healthcare, technology, and manufacturing sectors. She will be discussing best practices in establishing workplace violence policies, screening and terminating employees, as well as preventing outside risks. And from Portland, Oregon, we have Josh Daniels. He is president of videosurveillance.com. He is an ardent entrepreneur with years of experience in the security and IP video surveillance markets. His business experience and his vast industry knowledge have been instrumental in helping countless organizations improve their safety and security efforts. Josh is a graduate of Stanford University and the Wharton School, and he will discuss the latest security technology. And I am Beth Mirza. I am manager of online news content for SHRM Online. I've been with the Society for Human Resource Management in Alexandria, Virginia for 11 years, and I've reported on many aspects of HR, including employment law, employee relations, and safety and security in the workplace. The Society for Human Resource Management is the world's largest association devoted to human resource management. Now let's turn to the topic at hand. Workplace violence is a serious issue for many employers. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration reports that nearly 2 million American workers report an incident of workplace violence each year. And the Society for Human Resource Management's Workplace Violence Survey, which was published this year, found that over 1/3 of organizations reported incidents of workplace violence. Workplace violence is a costly issue for employers as well. The 2011 Liberty Mutual Workplace Safety Index reports assaults and violent acts as the 10th leading cause of non-fatal occupational injury at a workers' compensation cost of $590 million during 2009. Workplace violence, unfortunately, can turn extremely injurious and fatal. In 2011, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, 780 workers were killed as a result of violence and other injuries. And the impact on female workers seems to be disproportionate. Of the 375 fatal work injuries involving female workers, 21% involved homicides, and nearly 2 out of every 5 homicide, the assailant was a relative. Almost all of them were spouses or domestic partners. So the impact that domestic violence has on the workplace is profound. As far as other costs that are tallied when it comes to workplace violence, in 2003, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention estimated that domestic or intimate partner violence costs employers $727 million in lost productivity, with more than 7.9 million paid workdays lost each year. So with all that in mind, that's a lot to think about, we're going to turn to our panelists who have prepared some remarks to share with all of us, and then we're going to open the discussion to your questions. So Joel, would you like to start us off?
Thank you. The first thing I want to share is that if you read the newspaper, you would think that the workplace violence problem that you need to attend to is mass homicide in the workplace. And while that's certainly humongous problem, and even one such event is tragic and catastrophic, an awful lot of harm gets done with much less serious incidents of workplace violence that happen every day and that affect productivity, that affect the morale of workers, the work experience for workers, and the product that consumers receive. So comprehensive workplace violence prevention project isn't just aimed at the prevention of the very rarest event of mass homicide. It's also intended to create an environment where every single employee feels safe, respected, and fairly treated, so that violence of all kinds can be prevented. The second important point I want to make is that despite what you'll read about profiles or warning signs of workplace violence, there is no profile of a person who's going to commit a severe act of workplace violence. In fact, profiles are just another word for stereotypes. And stereotypes blind us to real risks. What we do know is that there are signs of troubled employees and troubling situations that, if left unattended, will generally get worse instead of better. So if a company knows that they have a troubled employee and they don't do anything to get that person help, it's relatively unlikely that that person's going to get better or solve their problems without any positive intervention. Same thing with troubling situations. For example, racial tension in a workplace may not result in a mass homicide, but it can dramatically affect the experience of workers, their productivity, and can result in less serious forms of workplace violence, such as bullying or simple assaults, which have their own negative effects on the productivity of the workplace. So what that means is that your strategies have the following principles. The first one is to teach your managers to treat all employees in a manner that's safe, respectful, and fair. The second thing is to teach supervisors and leaders, including labor organization leaders such as union stewards, how to recognize troubled people and troubling situations as early as possible, and to report them so that something can be done about them. Now, if the next principle is that if you want people to report troubled coworkers and troubling situations, you have to have a presumptively beneficent response to such reports. In other words, your response must be helpful instead of punitive. If you punish people when they're scary or appear to be troubled, then people are going to stop reporting, either because of fears of retaliation or because they're worried about a friend's well-being. They're going to stop reporting things. They're going to stop asking for help. Later on, when we're going to get some questions, I'm sure, about domestic violence. And one of the principles that we entertain pretty religiously is that you don't punish victims, even if that would be an easy solution. So if someone is being threatened by a domestic partner or a husband or a wife, and the threat's very serious, often the question comes up, why don't we just fire them? They're bringing danger to the workplace. We can make the problem go away by terminating the person. Well, the first reason to not do that is it's a rotten thing to do to a human being who's a victim instead of a perpetrator. It's not fair, and it feels bad to do that. But even if you're selfish and greedy, it's a stupid thing to do anyway, because if you get a reputation for punishing victims, victims will stop coming forward and telling you when they've been threatened by a spouse or a domestic partner. As a result, you'll be prevented from taking the steps necessary to protect the workplace from that violence. So you need to have a partnership with victims where they feel safe telling you about lethal dangers so that you can do something about it. The only way to do that is to not punish people for being victims. So in essence, what we're talking about is identifying troubled employees, not to punish them, but to get them help. And the earlier that you identify them, the less costly that help is, both in terms of the monetary cost to the business and the life cost to the employee. If you wait until somebody makes a lethal threat and tells you, I'm going to kill my boss, now your options are very few and they're relatively dire. So we want to identify troubled employees in troubling situations as early as we possibly can and respond in a helpful way as opposed to a punitive way. By doing so, we'll create an environment where people feel comfortable coming forward when they're worried about the well-being of a friend. And not only will we prevent acts of mass murder, but we'll also prevent less serious forms of interpersonal violence and violence aimed at the person themselves, such as suicide attempts, suicide, drug addiction, etc. So that's basically the threat assessments group has a relatively simple corporate philosophy, which is we want to create an environment where people are safe, respected, and fairly treated, where people feel comfortable reporting concerns about a coworker who's in trouble or a troubling situation, a company that responds presumptively with help instead of punishment. And when you do that, our data show that you can immediately and dramatically improve the safety of any workplace.
Great, great. Thank you, Joel. Let's turn to Tess. If you can bring the HR perspective in about how employees can come to management to share their what might be troubling them about a coworker or about a situation in their lives. How does HR kick in?
Thank you, Beth and Joel. Those were some great pointers. Today, I just want to share with you some best practices for establishing a workplace violence policy, because it really is up to you as a business owner or HR manager to prevent these things from happening in the first place. So there are some ways that you can do this within your own organization. First, anytime you work, if you're concerned about possible risks of violence in your particular workplace, like if you work in an industry that has high turnover, maybe because it's a stressful work environment, you'll want to take the time to work with a local security firm to identify ways to prevent and reduce violence at work. And one way to do this is to do a walkthrough to evaluate what areas of your company may be at risk, both from the inside and outside sources. And of course, don't forget about those threats from email and social media sites, which a lot of times can also make employees feel unsafe or threatened due to conflicts online. Another thing you want to do is to communicate a zero tolerance policy for any form of violence. Workplace violence, as it's defined, is any act or threat of physical violence, harassment, intimidation, or any other disruptive behavior that occurs at the work site where an employee might feel threatened in some way. And this can include some very insidious forms such as bullying, professional disrespect, racism, sexism, and sometimes going as far as making verbal threats or physical gestures, and that's both on and off the job. And it also goes for violence that comes from the outside, such as customers, visitors, spouses, boyfriends, family members. So these are things you need to be mindful of. So again, as a responsible organization, you must carefully conduct all pre-employment criminal background checks for all new hires to rule out anyone who may have a history of violence. And you should state that you have a zero tolerance for any type of behavior that could be threatening or demeaning to an employee. Make sure you state this clearly at all your new employee orientation sessions, during your training meetings, and make sure it's written in the corporate handbook. And include specific steps for reporting any events to HR immediately. Now, to facilitate this, you'll definitely want to encourage an open door communication system for all your employees. And this goes back to Joel's point. If employees feel comfortable and have the confidence that they can step into the HR person's office or their manager's office anytime they need to talk about a problem with a coworker, a spouse, management, or even a customer that's causing them grief, this is especially important because communication can bridge the gap between employees who are struggling, in their personal lives or on the job with other coworkers or even their managers. So providing a safe space where they can seek guidance and support without any fear of reprisal, that's absolutely critical to reducing workplace violence from happening in the first place. Another thing I'd like to talk to you about is, make sure that there's a system for you to report any suspected employee tensions or even conflicts with your management team itself. This goes back to having an open door policy for your company as a whole. So as you develop your written guidelines for violence prevention, make sure that this includes a communication policy that encourages employees to report this to a supervisor or to HR immediately. Don't wait. Just let someone know what's going on. And this also goes for employees who are experiencing violence at home and might need some support to get out of a bad situation. Beth already mentioned that nearly 2 out of every 5 homicides to female workers, the assailants were relatives, and a lot of times they were spouses or domestic partners. So it's very important to be aware of any potential threats that could harm one of your employees. And of course, if an incident occurs, have a plan in place to take immediate action, document it, and make sure that you notify the authorities if it's appropriate. Even with a well-developed workplace violence prevention program in place, sometimes workplace violence can occur. So this means you need to be prepared with a system for taking action to protect your employees, your property, your customers, and then have a way to document and report this event swiftly. And as an HR professional, I have personally experienced episodes where there was workplace violence. And I was, for example, there was a workplace that I was involved in. It was a manufacturing environment, and unbeknownst to management, there was a love triangle going on. So an employee came to me, a female employee, and told me that she had broken up with one of the employees there and was now dating one of the other employees. And it became a volatile situation to where the one employee, the ex-boyfriend, actually shoved and assaulted the new boyfriend. And so unfortunately we had to get the authorities involved. But because we knew about it, we were able to diffuse anything further from happening, and we were able to handle it swiftly and make sure that it was taken care of before anyone else was endangered or hurt. So be prepared. Prevention is always important. So to do this, one easy way to do it is to add a workplace violence section directly into your emergency response plan. And you can assign a designated area where employees, if they had to, could escape to safety if an event happened on site. Such a back office or a parking lot would be a good idea. And make sure you instruct all employees to notify the authorities should an event occur off-site. And have a printed phone number for the local police and your fire department available near all phones, if possible. Another way to offset and prevent violence from happening is to assign a team leader for each department, and this is someone who can guide employees in the event a violent action happens on site. So as part of this plan, of course, as an HR professional or business owner, you make sure that you have an updated list of all emergency contacts for your staff members, so that if you have to alert family members or the authorities, you have that information. And make sure that you have a local security firm, on contract for any follow-up consulting, education, and support for the affected employees. Now, because workplace violence often centers around an unsuspected change of status for an employee, such as a termination or a disciplinary meeting, I'd like to leave you with the following final guidelines for handling these types of meetings. First of all, as a rule of thumb, if you have to discipline or terminate an employee, make sure that you, number one, respect the individual. They are a human being, they have feelings, they have financial needs, and so it can be a very upsetting situation to be in as an employee. Put yourself in their shoes for a moment. Second, make sure that you schedule any meetings of this nature at the end of the work week, at the end of the shift. And the reason that I say that is because it gives the employee the privacy to talk with you and the management team, and also it's more dignified for them if they get upset and they need to leave. They can be escorted out quietly and not in front of all their peers. So that can often help, and it can diffuse a lot of upset. They have the weekend to think about it, in other words. So another thing you can do is offer support and alternatives. If you have to discipline an employee or terminate an employee, give them some alternatives. Offer them some support, maybe some career counseling or some post-job support, so that they can get on their feet and figure out what they need to do to improve their life. And of course, HR will tell you, every HR person will tell you this, make sure you document everything that happens. Have a person there, another manager, and document everything so that you can back it up if there's a problem. So I hope that these tips will help you in your own organization, and hopefully we won't see too many more incidents of employee violence in the workplace anytime soon. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tess. Thank you so much for those tips. They're really valuable. Josh, can you tell us some tools that employers can use to safeguard their property and their workers?
Sure. Thanks, Beth. So my name is Josh Daniels. I'm with videosurveillance.com. We're a leading virtual integrator of video surveillance systems. We've got thousands of customers around the world to which we've provided these kinds of systems, which can be used for prevention and investigation of workplace violence if it occurs. First, I want to talk about new technology in the video surveillance arena. There's been a very dramatic transition from analog technology, often referred to as CCTV or closed-circuit television, to digital technology, which is IP technology. And that's occurred over the last 5 or 10 years and is dramatically changing the functionality of these video surveillance systems. Additionally, we have seen high-resolution video surveillance footage through megapixel cameras, which provides HD TV resolution, and also compatibility with remote devices like smartphones, such as iPhones, and Android devices, and tablets like iPads. So the end result has been that video surveillance today is more powerful, easy to use, and cost-effective than it's ever been. I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the goals of a video surveillance system and how they can help prevent workplace violence. So primary goals that we identify are to deter incidents from both inside and outside threats, as well as to prevent accidents in the workplace. Also allow the employer to respond quickly during and after an incident, and then finally to document evidence if needed for investigation after an incident. Let's talk about outside threats first. Primary outside threats could result in property crime, theft, physical crime, or assault or worse from employees, disgruntled ex-employees, family or friends, as mentioned previously. It's really a best practice for a video surveillance system to capture the face recognition of all visitors to a facility, which would allow for multiple camera presentations in key areas to get good facial video. And probably we recommend combining both obviously placed cameras but also discrete cameras, and planning for challenging light conditions. With regards to areas, we recommend covering high traffic entrance and exit areas, as well as parking lots, garages, and driveways, which allow for identification of suspicious or suspect vehicles, which prevents vehicle break-ins and also prevents assaults and robberies. We also recommend creating a visitor management policy to prevent outside threats and really track the ebb and flow of visitors to a facility or a company. With regards to inside threats, which predominantly come from employees in the form of employee versus employee violence or employee versus employee theft, we recommend cameras in common work areas, as well as cameras in break rooms and storage and locker areas. Let's talk about accident prevention. Video surveillance can help to enforce safety policies in the workplace. They allow for the review of video for violations both before and after the fact, and also cameras and monitors can remind employees that video surveillance is actively occurring. Video surveillance systems can also document potential liabilities like slip and fall activities, and protect against fraudulent claims, and allow an employer to respond quickly to real incidents that occur. I'd like to wrap up with some best practices that are recommended by videosurveillance.com. We recommend that you audit a video surveillance system regularly, verifying that the system works on at least a quarterly basis, capturing the quality of video that's needed for your needs, which typically relates to facial recognition and so an audit is a best practice. Additionally, we recommend creating a post-incident process which allows for the workplace to practice searching and exporting video for police and other authorities to investigate. We recommend locking a server room to keep the recorded video safe from criminals or employees that might have designs on the video. We also recommend UPS or uninterruptible power supply backup in the event of a power outage. Research has shown that there is more crime in the event of a power outage, and it's really ideal to have cameras continue recording if power is lost. And then finally, and perhaps most importantly, it's important to plan for the future with a video surveillance system. We recommend expandable systems that can grow with an organization. Without fail, our customers all want to add more cameras over time to their systems, and so we recommend planning for that. And then finally, we recommend, in regards to future-proofing, to use digital or IP cameras as opposed to analog cameras, and to use high-quality cabling like Cat5 and Cat6. Thanks, Beth.
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much, Josh. Okay, now we're going to kind of kick off our question and answer session, and we're going to start with a kind of overall question for all the panelists to chime in on, and then we'll get to some more specific things. So let's start with with this. How can a company strategically and holistically address the issue of workplace violence? So what are the different roles that need to be played within the company, and who should be responsible for them? Tess talked about her specific incident of working at an employer and addressing an incident of workplace violence specifically. So Tess, if you could talk about how each person on, I don't know if you had a threat management team or you had a crisis response team, or if you just had you jumping in on the situation. Tell us how that played out, and then maybe we can go to Joel and then Josh to talk about different roles or different employees who might hold different responsibilities in a situation like that. So Tess?
Sure, I'd be glad to talk about this. In my situation, it was a small manufacturing plant, so naturally several employees ran to my office to let me know that the activity was happening. And I was aware that there was some tension, so I was the person that had to handle it, but we also had to involve a couple of the floor managers to actually restrain the two gentlemen that were involved, and then we called the police. But we did have, I would recommend that there definitely be a safety officer on staff for your company if you're able to assign somebody that maybe has a background, in on-site hazard prevention, safety, even somebody that maybe has a background in the medical field or law enforcement, somebody that can understand what happens to when somebody loses it. So yeah, I definitely think there should be someone assigned, and if you have a large company, there should probably be someone assigned to each floor in each building to manage that. So yeah, that's really the best I can offer.
Yeah. Joel, what do you think? What have the companies that you've worked with, what have been their best practices as far as this is concerned?
Well, a lot of our companies are quite large, the Fortune 100 companies, where they're doing a very expensive, comprehensive program, training all managers, all union leadership, and so forth. We also have clients of the threat assessment group that are smaller companies that have been creative about looking for ways to intervene that are very cost effective. So for example, they might team up with other nearby companies to provide training at a lower cost because you can get more people trained at the same time. I think the most important thing, though, is every single company should, as Tess suggested, should have a workplace violence policy. For example, can you bring a gun into the workplace or not? If somebody starts waving a gun around and you try to fire them and then you find out that you don't have a policy against possessing a gun in the workplace, you might not be able to do anything about it. And you can't, it's not fair to hold people accountable for rules that don't exist. So a comprehensive workplace violence policy. I do want to say that zero tolerance, as Tess suggested, is imperative, but it doesn't mean that every incident gets the same response. All it means is that we don't ignore incidents of threat or violence in the workplace, but it doesn't mean that we stop using our common sense. So each incident, each threat typically requires reasonableness, thought, and often additional information before you make an informed judgment about what the right intervention is. Typically, ignoring it is the wrong call. That's why we like the idea of zero tolerance. But the term has become misused sometimes because in some places it just means, for example, we treat every threat the same and the person gets fired. So when somebody at a surprise birthday party says, well, I'm going to kill you guys for this surprise party, they end up terminating somebody who really didn't threaten anyone because of an abuse of this zero tolerance concept. So I just wanted to clear that up. But the main thing is to start by doing the things that the other two panelists mentioned is, do you have a policy? Do you have the hardware in place to support it? And if not, then you want to do a comprehensive audit of of the likely dangers to your workplace and then do something about it.
Great. Those are good tips. Thank you, Joel. Josh, what are some best practices at your client companies? What do different people have as their responsibility, and who do they have on staff to address these issues?
So our customer base, Beth, ranges from very small companies to Fortune 100 companies, and so their staffing and their resources really run a wide spectrum. In a small company, typically it would be the owner of the business or a manager who's responsible for technology such as video surveillance and monitoring and reacting with that. In a larger company, it might be what's called a CSO, a Chief Security Officer, or it could be part of the IT, information technology staff. I think to further Joel's comment, I do think that the video surveillance technology is just part of a multifaceted approach that employers can use to provide a safer workplace, and that a video surveillance system and policy dovetails with workplace safety, and to the extent it's used appropriately and disclosed in an employee handbook, as we do at our company, it makes employees aware that the employer values a safe workplace and has expectations in that regard. Absolutely.
All right, thank you. Well, now we're going to open the floor to the questions that today's participants have submitted. Some of them were submitted in advance, and here's one that came in earlier. Here we go. It's the old conundrum. Where should HR stand on balancing an employee's reasonable expectation of privacy against the employer's business justification for surveillance? Tess, do you want to start that off as the HR?
Oh yeah. I've heard, and this is a common concern among business owners, that they don't want to invade upon their employees' privacy, but yet at the same time it's their property and they want to make sure that there's no problem. So I mean, first of all, let's make the point, there has to be a real business justification for monitoring your work site. So but at the same time you also need to handle it with respect to the employees and the specific areas that are to be monitored. For example, it's illegal for an employer to monitor bathrooms and dressing rooms, but it's not illegal to monitor common workspaces and entryways. So you need to have common sense about how you employ a monitoring system within your workplace. And keep in mind also that employers can also monitor their employees' use of the internet and email and telecommunication use while on the job. So although the Electronic Communications Privacy Act, it does prohibit unauthorized interception of some electronic communications, but it is important to communicate to your corporate, within your corporate policy, about all the forms of monitoring that you do plan to use, and then have all the employees sign an agreement so that they understand this when they're hired. So that's a good way to still respect their rights, but at the same time protect your business from any problems.
So maybe being transparent about what you're doing and why you're doing it is a good way to kind of sell the employees on the need for a security or for a monitoring system.
Absolutely.
Joel, what do you think about that? What's your stand on the question of expectation of privacy versus business justification? I'm
sad to report to you that most Americans think that privacy died in their childhood. We're not a very private society anymore, for better and for worse. But I think what people resent is feeling betrayed. So I like the idea of transparency. I do want to add there are times when surreptitious recording is both legally and ethically justified for specific reasons. So I wouldn't go as far as to say you can never use surreptitious recording, either audio or visual video recording. But in general, I think you want to be clear with people about the rules of engagement and what the deal is, so that they feel if you do it right, it'll actually improve morale because people will feel that you're spending money to make them safer. And that can actually help morale a lot if it's done the way that Tess suggested, where you let people know what the policy is in advance and you keep your word about the promises that you make.
Absolutely. That's great. Clear communications with employees always will get you far. Josh, I want to take it to you now. If you could talk about some of the latest advancements in surveillance technology that employees might be seeing in their workplaces sometime soon.
Sure. So the biggest advancement, Beth, has been in the form of the cameras. Cameras historically have been lower technology, analog cameras, and they've been relatively unintelligent devices. Today, we're seeing an abundance of higher quality intelligent devices like IP cameras, which are on a network and have network functionality and features. We're also seeing much higher quality video resolution, as high as you would see with HD TV on a television screen. We're seeing edge storage, where storage can be maintained at the edge of a network, and also viewing on remote devices, which could be smartphones or tablets. This allows for remote access to a facility, which is a really powerful construct that previously was not really available before the internet and these newer devices. Additionally, I would say that there's also logic built into these devices and networks today, where there can be alerting and notification if certain events occur or if certain criteria are met, and that can be used to help optimize workplace safety.
That's really interesting and very exciting, and make people's jobs a lot easier in some instances. All right, I want to take it in a little bit different turn now. We get to discuss a little bit about the effect of domestic violence in the workplace, and this is another question for Joel and for Tess. Joel, let's go to you first. How can employers best manage a situation in which an employee is being harassed by his or her abuser while at work? And how can the employer maintain the safety of the victim's coworkers as well?
Well, these are the most difficult workplace violence cases that we manage, almost without exception. The cases that we're managing on a regular basis, usually they're pretty straightforward, and we're able to give people advice that resolves the problem pretty quickly. The nights I have trouble sleeping, it's almost always because of a domestic violence case. And largely that has to do with what I said earlier about the prohibition against being perceived as a company that punishes victims is almost absolute. That's a very bad thing to do for the reasons I said earlier. On the other hand, we want to make sure that the victims or potential victims are aware of their options. Now, some companies have done this in really clever ways. For example, one of our clients shared with us an innovation where they put information, leaflets about the domestic violence shelters in that city where someone could go for legal assistance for free. In the ladies' restroom where men would be very unlikely to see it, and where a woman could read that privately without losing her ability to share her problem with somebody else. We don't want to take choices away from people at a time when they're being coerced or threatened. We haven't talked about EAP, but we're big fans of good EAP programs, employee assistance programs that can provide emotional support for women during a very difficult time, can often be very helpful. Hardware solutions such as the ones Josh mentioned, if you know what the person looks like, you have a picture of the person, it's now very easy to put that on the computer screens of security staff, hopefully with limited access, ingress and egress to the workplace, so that you can actually know when they arrive before they get to their intended victim. If we have a targeted victim, we may take very specific steps, in some cases including the hiring of off-duty police officers who are armed at the entrance to the workplace, so that if the person shows up and misbehaves, they're not committing a crime. If they commit an assault on a police officer who's off duty, that's a felony. And we find that police officers, when they call for help, get a very quick response from their colleagues. So there's times when that's our recommendation. Each case is always, I've said this before, I'm going to probably say it 5 more times today. Every case is unique and needs to have knowledgeable, in some cases with outside consultation or a trained internal team to look at the specific facts of the case. There is no formula for how to handle these cases safely. Every one of them requires a different response. And there are times when it's not only in the company's best interest, but in the victim's best interest for that person to relocate, and it may be in the company's interest not to terminate them, but to make it possible for them to separate in a positive way and move to a different place, perhaps to a different employer, where they're safer, not as punishment, but as a favor to the intended victim. So every case has a different set of responses, and this is just a flavor for some of the ones that might be considered in particular cases.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Tess, what would you recommend that employers do if faced with this situation?
Well, it's the employer's responsibility to investigate any reported, acts of harassment or bullying or any type of threat in the workplace, and it goes back to just basic HR law. OSHA mandates that all employers are to take steps to minimize any risk in the workplace, where if there are perceived threats, and so they are, HR folks and employers are responsible for investigating that and getting the facts before they act. But I mean, in most cases, what should happen is that the 2 employees should be separated during the investigation process, whether one's reassigned, like Joel mentioned, or maybe suspended if it warrants it for a certain period of time until the investigation is completed. And it can be done either internally or by an outsourced security firm can come in and actually conduct the investigation. But of course, make sure this is documented and the offender and the victim are respected during that process. But in severe cases, obviously there needs to be some recourse. There needs to be a way for the victim to feel safe, and therefore sometimes you have to go as far as having the person escorted on and off the property, and also setting up protective orders sometimes. So it just depends on how severe it is, really.
Absolutely. All right, thank you. All right, we have another question for Josh. What minimal equipment is required for internet viewing of cameras from home or smartphone? What are some options for employers?
Sure, Beth. So historically, video surveillance has been monitored by what's called central station monitoring, and this is where you actually have people that are in a facility watching a bank of TV monitors and looking for threats in a facility. And the research has shown that this is not only an expensive way to monitor video surveillance, it's also relatively low quality because, admittedly, humans can't watch multiple screens simultaneously and monitor for threats. And so what we find is that central station monitoring is somewhat of an old paradigm. And today's cameras, and particularly IP cameras, are readily able to communicate with web browsers on computers as well as smartphones and tablets. And really all that's required is an IP camera that's a relatively modern IP camera, as well as internet access at the camera location. The viewing would be through a web browser on a computer or on a smartphone or tablet, or also through an application or app on a smartphone or a tablet.
That sounds cost-effective for sure, that you wouldn't have to have a dedicated space to watch screens all the time, or even a dedicated one person to watch screens all the time.
Right, and there's no fees on these programs. This is just default functionality with the cameras that's provided. So there's not a service that needs to be subscribed to or ongoing fees.
Absolutely, that's great. All right, I'm going to swing it back again to Joel and Tess to talk a little bit more generally about workplace violence. And this is an interesting conundrum that some employers face. What happens when there's a violent event that involves employees but occurs off-site? It doesn't occur at the employer's work area. Whether it's between two employees who maybe met somewhere else at a sporting event or a bar and got into an altercation, or maybe just one employee who got into fisticuffs overnight. How should the employer address it? And if so, how should the employer do so? And Tess, let's start with you. What's your recommendation?
Yeah, this is a twist. Definitely a different situation, but it does happen. If the employee or employees are actually on the clock, they are officially still your responsibility as a company. So you should definitely, as soon as you hear about it, try to bring the employees in individually, find out what happened, and then if you can, try to moderate through it. To see if it was just a misunderstanding and how severe it really was. Obviously, if somebody was hurt, you would have to, notify the authorities if it's during work hours or on, work time. For example, you may have remote employees that are sales folks or drivers, and they may have injured somebody. So you have to take action. It is your responsibility as a company to do that. Now, off the clock, that can be a little more tricky because what employees and what individuals do on their own time is really their responsibility. And unless you get into a situation where you've got, two employees that are out partying or maybe at a community function and they get into it. So again, it's a lot of times it just takes some moderation and finding out what happened, and then if it's, too severe where there's going to be problems on site, you may have to take some more action, such as separating the employees or having management just really observe what's going on. So yeah, sometimes you just have to take initiative and address it. Definitely.
Absolutely. Joel, what's your take on the situation?
Well, again, case by case, but the first question I always ask when something happens off property is, how do we know about it? And in fact, it may be work-related, or it may not. Another issue is the degree to which it's indicative of a troubled person, as I said earlier. So if somebody comes to work with a black eye and says, I got drunk and got in a fight at a bar last night, they may not have misbehaved at work, so that you can't discipline them, but we don't want to discipline them anyway. What we want to do is consider the possibility that they have a drinking problem, or that they have an anger problem, or both, in which case EAP or their healthcare benefits might be enormously helpful to the person to get treatment for a problem that could then surface at work. So the idea of a presumptively helpful response is your best friend here, so that you can say, you know, when you come in with a black eye and say you should have seen the other guy, that might scare your coworkers. So that it becomes relevant to the workplace, it becomes relevant to productivity and morale of your coworkers. But most importantly, it's a really bad way to live your life. You get in a lot of bar fights, bad things are going to happen to you, and that's probably a person who needs some help. We would like to get them help not because we think they're going to commit an atrocity, but because they're a human being who needs help and works for us, and we'd rather have them be healthy and productive than scaring their coworkers and getting into fights because they drink too much. So
Right.
I think again, every case is deserving of its own. I guess I should add one thing, which is that if an argument starts at work and then erupts into violence later on off premises, probably you should treat that as an incident of workplace violence, presumptively, and investigate it as you would have pretty thoroughly if it had taken place on site. So, and it may involve a consultation with your counsel about whether or not this has implications for liability for the company.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And kind of to that point, we have several questions that are asking about how to prepare for different security measures. Who do we talk to get ready for this? What kind of systems should we use? So Josh, if you could talk a little bit about businesses that kind of have to set up their surveillance systems piecemeal, here a little bit here, a little bit there. How should they go about doing that? Is there particular areas that should be under surveillance more than other areas? What's the minimum that people can start with?
Sure, I think that's good. That's a good set of questions. In today's economic times, certainly businesses and organizations are constrained with regards to economics, and so we at videosurveillance.com recommend that systems are future-proofed by their design from the outset. And so really a good video surveillance system can start with as little as one high-quality camera, as long as the configuration and design of the system allows for future expansion. We recommend focusing on digital or IP cameras as opposed to analog cameras because of the future proofing that those IP cameras provide. We recommend fewer, better quality cameras as opposed to more cameras that are lower quality. You can buy a video surveillance system at a Costco or a Walmart, and in our experience, most of these systems are low cost, but also relatively low quality. And just having a lot of cameras up doesn't necessarily cover the needs of a facility or a business. It's better to have fewer cameras that are higher quality. And I would say also not trying to capture everything. You're not going to be able to capture everything in common areas. I would focus on areas of ingress and egress where visitors are coming to a facility or leaving it, as well as common areas where there's a lot of activity and a lot of personnel.
Absolutely. And Tess and Joel, I think that there are also some low-cost or free community resources that employers can tap as well, like local domestic violence shelters might have speakers that would be able to come and address employees to talk about their services, to talk about behaviors that people should look out for. Law enforcement oftentimes will come and address employee groups. Tess and Joel, could you talk about how maybe employers should be talking to psychologists or threat management groups in order to prepare their workplace violence policies?
Who first?
Oh, let's do Joel first. Let's do you.
In all cases, you certainly want to maximize the way that you use the free resources in the community, for sure. And but some of them are double-edged swords. So, for example, if you call the police about an incident, that's not always a good thing to do because you're going to lose control over the response to that incident. The police aren't going to ask you for advice about what what they should do when they get there. They're going to take over the situation. Now, sometimes that's a very appropriate thing to do, and sometimes it's not. Some police departments will allow you to make information-only reports to say, we've had a threat, we don't want you to come over right now, but we just want you to know about it in case things get worse. We'll keep you posted. Many of our clients, we encourage to, in fact, all of our clients, we encourage to have real good relationships with the local police precinct or police department. Invite them out for a luncheon when there is no crisis so that they know you and you know them. We often recommend sharing architectural plans of the workplace so that if, God forbid, there's a hostage crisis or some need for police to intervene, it's very helpful for them to know the physical plant layout, including, as Josh suggested earlier, how many ways are there in and out of the building? What are the likely threats that you are, what are the things you most care about protecting, and what is it that you're most worried about protecting them from? That should guide you, and I can't agree more enthusiastically with what Josh just said a minute ago. I would much rather have a few cameras that are high quality, well placed, than a whole bunch of cheap cameras that give you bad images and that are helter-skelter all over the place. That's something that your consultant company, whether it's videosurveillance.com or whoever you use, that should be advising you about what's the most strategic way to use these hardware resources to create a safer workplace. Giving your employees more good information is almost always a helpful thing to do. I like to recommend, if you have EAP, doing it through EAP so that those resources are integrated, because often it's going to be the EAP provider who's going to make the referral to the specific community agency, and it's a good idea for them to kind of be the Grand Central Station of how those resources get assigned or offered to individual employees.
Absolutely, absolutely. Tess, is there any community resources that you're aware of that you'd like to share that you've employed before?
There is actually, and I don't have a lot to add to what Joel said, but currently there are organizations that work on primarily like business continuity and safety, local community safety hazard type topics. And I know in our communities here in Charleston, we have a team of volunteer safety officers that will actually come on site and train folks within your company to become safety leaders in the event that there is any type of a hazard, an accident. We have a lot of hurricanes and things here on the East Coast, so a lot of our folks are trained in those types of how to respond to those types of events. So I know that they also teach personal safety and things like that. So there's plenty of resources out there, and I would suggest offering safety training to all your employees that are interested, and then have local security experts come in and give talks and demonstrations to your employees that are interested, and then assign some folks within your team that show aptitude for that and interest and want to take that role actively. Those would be my suggestions.
May I add a couple of points? One thing that the local police in many jurisdictions are happy to provide is, in the context of community policing, is they'll come to your house and make suggestions about how to live a safer life, to cut down bushes where someone might hide, exterior lighting. The other thing I wanted to mention is I would recommend caution in terms of referring to a local psychologist or psychiatrist. And there are people who specialize. The threat assessment group is certainly not the only people who specialize in assessing the risk of violence. But there are people who specialize in this, and most psychologists, psychiatrists, and physicians don't. So you wouldn't ask your primary care physician to do heart surgery, and this is a specialty area. So if you just ask a local psychologist to do a risk assessment, and they're not somebody who's a trained forensic psychologist or psychiatrist with specialized training in risk assessment, that's not something I would recommend that you rely on.
That's a great point. That's a great point. Okay, we are closing in on 3 o'clock Eastern Time here, so we will be wrapping up our panel discussion for today. I want to thank you to all the viewers who joined today's discussion and our panelists for sharing their time and expertise. I believe that today's discussion has been recorded and will be available for playback, and all of the viewers will receive an email telling you how to access the recording. We did get a good number of questions coming in online from the participants, from the viewers, and if we were not able to address your question, then we can get back to you offline through email or an FAQ after this session. When the recorded session airs, then FAQ will be available, and there will be a transcript as well. So I want to thank you all again, and have a great day.